Donald Trump has acted way beyond the pale. President Clinton did not fire the head of the FBI. President Clinton did not want the head of the FBI in office, thought that he had a political agenda against him, but he didn't fire him. President Clinton didn't go out every day and call this a witch hunt and say that there was nothing to this. The president went about doing his job. President Clinton didn't 10,000 times tell lies and mislead the American public. He did mislead the American public and lie to them in that Roosevelt room. There's no defense of that. But to try to compare these things, and I think that's getting back to the Axios stories, that's the strength of the Axios stories. Donald Trump is using the full weight of the federal government and the executive branch now to protect himself and to cover up what he's done. And in the case of President Clinton, he let this thing go. And the idea that we sit here 20 years later saying, "Oh, the president committed crimes." The president made mistakes. He's acknowledged them, but I don't believe he's committed a crime. And the one thing we haven't seen from President Trump is any acknowledgement. And I'll remind you, President Clinton went out and apologized for this before the report came out and before the House took up impeachment. So it wasn't until he wasn't saying, "I want to wait till all the jury's totally in." He acknowledged these things as things that he had done wrong. He acknowledged the pain that he'd caused to his family and the distraction to the country. And I think it's wholly on a different scale when you have allegations and now evidence that a foreign government influenced our election, maybe delegitimized the election of a president, and the president's team, if not the president, was working with them. Wholly on a different scale.
What about that, Judge?
Well, one of the great strengths of the special counsel investigation is that a very important set of charges have been brought against 13 Russian individuals and 2 organizations. I've read those indictments carefully. There's not one word that suggests collusion. The Russians behaved very badly indeed, criminally, and they should be brought to the bar of justice. Let's see. Was there collusion? Thus far, including in the Paul Manafort case, we've seen no evidence of collusion.
But Joe is talking about obstruction of justice that we have seen evidence of. If you believe all of the tweets about a witch hunt and the firing of the FBI, the head of FBI, do you consider that obstruction of justice about this investigation?
We did not charge President Clinton with obstruction of justice because of James Carville, Sidney Blumenthal, an entire army. And one of the things, Joe, as you know, that President Clinton was very clever, very shrewd, because others did the dirty work. We were continually attacked, constantly attacked. Our motives and so forth, our operations were attacked, and our integrity was attacked. But President Clinton was able to rise above it, let others do the dirty work.
But what about this example of President Trump?
And what President Trump refuses to do is to follow the Clinton model. He wants to go on the attack himself. I do not consider that obstruction. I really don't. Because when you look at what the law of obstruction, you can have the moral view of what obstruction is, and then you can have the legal view, what is in fact constitutes the crime of obstruction of justice.
Hold on a second.
Hold on, Joe.
President Trump went on television.
There is no corrupt motive that has been defined by the Supreme Court of the United States, and that's where in this room I have said, don't be so broad-minded, so to speak, in saying this constitutes obstruction of justice. It doesn't obstruct justice to do what the president has the power to do, which is to fire the head of the FBI. And
listen, maybe I should have gone to law school, but so let me speak for everyone in America who didn't go to law school. President Trump went on television. Even after two days leading up to that interview, he lied about why he fired Comey. He directed Rod Rosenstein to write a phony letter about why he was being, but when he went on TV, he just felt like he had to let it all out. And he said, I fired him because I wanted to stop the Russia investigation, because I think the Russia investigation is a witch hunt. There may be in some narrow legal place where that is an obstruction of justice, To the rest of us, it is obstruction of justice on the face of it.
But he didn't shut down the investigation. That's one of the key things. He could have said this investigation is over.
He then tried to remove and then fired his attorney general. What else do you need to see that it's obstruction? What else? What else do you want to see as a prosecutor here?
You need to see action that actually results in the investigation not being able to be carried forward. And Bob Mueller, as we know, has done a very thorough job, from everything that we know, of carrying on the investigation. No cessation of funding and the like. Should the president have said these things? Of course he should not have said these things. It was incredibly unwise to do it. But being unwise doesn't constitute a crime.
So efforts don't either. Just the effort of of changing the attorney general and the changing of the FBI doesn't constitute a crime.
In my judgment, it doesn't. And I think that is now considered the better view. Very few people are saying, we'll see what the House of Representatives says, that firing James Comey, which he had the authority to do, somehow constitutes an obstruction of justice. I view that as a huge challenge to basic
Sitting as
power.
the independent counsel 20 years ago, if Bill Clinton had fired Louis Freeh, would you have stood up and said, I think he has every right to do that?
I hope I would have. I might have been.
I tend to doubt that.
Oh, no. Well, Joe, go ahead and doubt it, but I have a very different view of presidential power, which is Article 2 of our Constitution gives the president authority over the executive branch. So President Trump could, in fact, have said, I want this investigation to stop.
Right.
Period, full stop. Then that, to me, does raise an issue of potential obstruction of justice. And if he shuts it down. He did not shut it down.
Do you have the same view of Nixon firing Archibald Cox, that was well within his power?
Yes, absolutely. It was within his power. And that was not even a basis of the charge in the House of Representatives. And I think it's really perilous, Joe, I honestly do, to try to gainsay what the president does in the exercise of Article 2 power and to say, aha, you have exercised the authority that you have. You sacked Jeff Sessions. I think that is an obstruction of justice. I believe that is a very, very terrible intrusion into the authority of the president. Let's look for corruption. Was there bribery? Was there a sellout to a foreign power and that sort of thing? But not just the exercise of his authority, whether it was wise or unwise.
He has the power to pardon. Is dangling a pardon, is that a potential obstruction of justice?
No, I think dangling a pardon, well, it could be. It could be. But once again, here is a power that's given to the President of the United States, and absent some issue of bribery. We've seen governors, former governors, go to jail for the sale of pardons and so forth. Absent that, I just think it's perilous, whoever the president is, to say that constitutes a crime. It may constitute an impeachable event, right? To use the pardon power in a way that the Congress of the United States views as an abuse of power.
Your thoughts?
Well, I think speaking for Americans who don't wake up every morning reading Article 2, and I don't mean that. I mean, it's that we have great lawyers in this country for a reason, and there's two sides to every issue. But I believe what the president is doing, and one of the reasons why it may not feel like obstruction of justice, is he does it in plain sight. Obstruction of justice is normally done quietly, and you don't want people to know. And he does this in plain sight. And I'll take the judge's legal view that the president has a right to do that. But I will not release the idea that it isn't an abuse of power. That it isn't an abuse of power for the president to do everything in his power to stop an investigation of himself.
Can I just also say, because you were talking about collusion before, no evidence of collusion here, and as you well know, because you are the one at the table who do go to law school, there's no crime. Collusion isn't a crime. There are other crimes around it. Conspiracy could be. Collusion with a small c, not a crime here. You say no evidence. And I just go back to the Donald Trump Jr. meeting, and Joe brought up what's happened in plain sight. The things that we know, the agreed upon facts are, and we've seen the emails, that Donald Trump Jr. was offered dirt on Hillary Clinton that he was told was from the Russian government. Okay, that is why he went into this meeting. He said, if that's true, that's great. I love it. Exactly. So that in and of itself, small c, because there's no crime here, is that small c collusion, walking into that meeting expecting to receive dirt from the Russian government on Hillary Clinton?
But I don't think it's a crime. You can question it and condemn it and
That
say
wasn't my
that
question.
should-
That wasn't my question. My question to you is that collusion, because we know collusion is not a crime, is that willingness to get information and work with, at a certain level, the Russian government to get dirt on Hillary Clinton?
I don't
is that
think
collusion?
no, I don't think that is collusion. You say, I don't admire the entire episode, but someone comes to you and says, I have information
Foreign government.
on an opponent, that unless there's a quid pro quo or some kind of arrangement, I think simply receiving it, again, unwise, I just don't see that as a crime.
And it is part of the counterintelligence investigation. Just to be clear, this is a legal investigation and counterintelligence. Do you think there's counterintelligence value in knowing whether a government had sway over the son of a presidential candidate?
Oh, in a counterintelligence investigation, you want to, John, as you know, gather absolutely all the facts in terms of the depth of the relationship and so forth. This appears to have been, from what I know on the outside, a one-off, as opposed to a collusion is, let's get together and we are going to, in fact, work together for a particular purpose, which is to influence an American election. Bob Mueller has had 20 months or so, and he has not made that allegation.